So today's sermon is definitely something I can't do. Well, I try to do. Overthinking and undertrusting. Overthinking, undertrusting. I think, who of you overthink? Okay. Overthinking and undertrusting. I struggle with this saying, is Jesus enough? And I think I've preached on it last week, but it's something in my own spiritual journey which I sometimes struggle with, to say that, is Jesus enough? Is he enough? So I want to use 3 passages just as an example to imagine if you were in these passages and it's happening to you, how would you feel and what would you say? One of them is where Jesus calms the storm. Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Suddenly, a furious storm came up and on the lake, so that the waves swept over that boat. Now you can imagine, this is not a big boat. It's a bit bigger than a rubber duck. There's sails, there's a roeispanner, there's no engine, there's no compass, there's nothing to get you out of there. Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." This passage, just as it is, has been so real in my life, where I feel like, Jesus, you're sleeping. Do you not see the waves coming? Do you not see what's happening? Do you not see the storm? Do you not see what's happening? Do you see how this thing is going? I mean, the elections, every single thing, the tension, the politics, economy, every single thing. Do you not see the storm, one after another, flowing over the boat? Do you not see it? And when they woke Jesus, he's not angry. And again, he's also not rattled. Nee? He's not moving. His only response is, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" And then he got up and he rebuked. Hy het die storm vasgevat. Hy het met hom geraas. Like a naughty child. He immediately spoke like thunder and he talked. And the winds and the waves came completely calm, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." Now I want to ask you again, overthinking and undertrusting. Those disciples are me and you. Now remember, this happened Matthew 8. So it happened. It happened where Jesus calmed the storm. So now we have the same scenario happening again, with a disciple who follows the Lord. Sorry, I'm just going to move this a bit because I think it's echoing on the speaker. We have the same scenario happening here. So, Matthew 14. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. It's interessant, I've read it many times in scripture. There's a lot of times where Jesus goes and he separates himself to go and pray. Like, soos hy gaan sonder homself af om te gaan bid. So he separates himself to go and pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. The same thing is starting to happen again. Not with random men, with disciples who've seen him heal people, who've seen him let blind people see, who've seen him let people raise from the dead. And then Jesus, shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out with fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." And then Peter is this impulsive guy. He says, "Lord, well, if it's you, tell me to come out and walk on the water." And Jesus says, "Come." Then Peter got out down out of the boat, and he walked on water and came towards Jesus. Now he's got one of two choices. You keep on walking, looking at him, or looking at the waves. Now the same scenario happened earlier with the boat, where Jesus was sleeping, and who were the people focusing on? On the waves. The very same scenario, focusing on the waves, focusing on the waves. The disciples should have focused on Jesus, and those other people should have focused on Jesus. Then Peter got out of the boat, he walked towards Jesus, but then he saw the wind, and he was afraid, and he began to sink, crying out, "Lord, save me." Now remember, they can't swim. Hulle is nie soos Rudy hulle wat elke dag hier mal in hierdie see ingaan, and they go swim every day, and they check the waves, and they've got buoys, and they can go underwater, and they've got snorkels, and they've got scuba gear, and they've got fins. They've got nothing. They can't swim. They even don't know how, if someone falls over, if you don't get them back on the boat, they die. Because they thought that there's mysterious creatures under the water eating them. So it's this place where if you were to get out of the boat, you would certainly die, especially if you were to sink. And Jesus reached out to him, catching him, saying, "You of little faith." Again, the same refrain, "You of little faith," he said. "Why did you doubt?" Overthinking and undertrusting. Looking at the waves, the waves are coming over the boat, the waves are coming over the sea. I'm trying to walk, I'm trying to sail, and I can't anymore. Later in Matthew, Jesus says this. He says in Matthew 24 verse 6, he says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come." That's a message from Jesus. Listen to this message. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Do not be alarmed. Such things must happen. Do we hear of wars? Are we alarmed of wars? You know, it was some of the things I was most scared of when I was little. Growing up, and there would a war would break out because you heard your father was op die grens, and you heard the wars were happening. But I mean, it's scary to think that wars could happen. And he said, "Do not be alarmed." So meneer daaroor stres nie. Meneer daaroor stres nie. Overthinking and undertrusting. The third one I want to look at is Paul. Paul is in prison, probably in Ephesus or in Rome. He's in prison. He's tied up, he's bound, he's lost pretty much everything. And then he writes this verse that we all know of. And he says, "Do not be anxious about anything." So he's writing to a church in Philippians. They have to bring him money to care for him, to provide for him. But his main priority of writing Philippians is the congregation. So he's in a dungeon. He's in a prison. And his main concern is his church. His main focus is what Jesus is doing. Not the waves in the church, the waves in prison. And he writes to them, he says, "Do not be anxious about anything." Do not be anxious about anything. We are the generation with the most anxiety ever. We are the generation with the most depression ever. Not generation, our age is the age of the most anxious people, the most depressed people of all times. And Paul says, do not be anxious. Jesus says, don't worry about wars. Don't worry about winds. Don't worry about storms. Paul says, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. He says, in all this, and when everything is falling apart, and this is where I struggle, because everything is falling apart, and everything happens, and everything falls, and then what? You just pray, and then you expect an answer. You just pray, and it should happen, and it's like you want to wake up Jesus and say, do you see the storm? Do you see the waves? Do you see the worries? Do you see us running out of money? Do you see us, the economy? Do you see how coalitions should form in the political sphere today? Do you see this, Lord? Can we wake you up? Can you help us? And he says in that moment, when he says verse 6 to verse 7, nothing happens. Nothing in Paul's life happens. He says, but when you present it to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts. Transcend. Transcend is a big word. It's transcendeer. It's to say you moving from this sphere, this life, into the spiritual life, moving into God's realm. I struggle with that transcendence, moving from here to what God is doing. Because here, there's a lot of storms. But where God is, it's calm and it's easy. And sometimes, or most of the time, I'm swimming here and not there. Like a few weeks ago, I swam in the ocean, and it was funny because in the ocean, you only see these heads bobbling, and you see people almost drowning, and you see rescue people rescuing them. And all you can hear in the ocean is the guy on the beach making jokes. I wanted to shout to him, are you stupid? Are you seeing what we are experiencing? And he's making jokes. Yeah, it's kind of choppy out there. You see the guys are struggling. I said, why don't you come in here? And you tell those very same jokes in here. But it's the same kind of thing. It's as if when you're standing on the beach and when you're in the ocean, it's two different things. But in the ocean, you're scared because it's unknown. It's deep. And you want to be on the beach. So you want to transcend. You want to move out to see what God sees. And then Paul says, I'm not saying this because I am in need. For I have learned to be content with whatever the circumstances. Well, that's also difficult. Can we be content with whatever the circumstances? We all want to control our external environment. Ons wil almal. We all want to control the external factors. We want to control what's happening to my kid at school. We want to control the teacher that's handling my kid at school. If she doesn't do it right, we're going to see the teacher. We're going to sort it out. What's happening with my children, my grandchildren, if it's unfair, I want to get involved. Yes, this is my moeilik. It's so difficult for me sitting next to the sport field and not get involved. It's so difficult. I can't. I'm so competitive. I can't. But it's her game. It's not my game. And I need to be content. And I need to say, okay, whatever happens should happen. Don't push her. She's 8. Don't force something upon her which she's not ready for. As a father, cheer her on and let her be content with whatever team she's playing in and against who she's playing. To be content with whatever. You see, that contentness is like, how am I content if my bank balance is not right? How am I content if my past is not right? How am I content if my family situation is not right? How am I content when my relationships is not right? Lord, these external things, they're not correlating. They're not providing for me to be content. They're ambivalent. It's distrustworthy. There's no external thing saying that I should be positive, that I should be grateful and thankful. But Paul says it's not going to come from there. Hope, it's not going to come from there. No government has ever got people free forever, or for 100 or 200, whatever years. No police force has ever set everyone free. No righteousness has ever happened outside. But we're looking for that because our faith is in that. Seeing the lifeguard while I'm in the sea. Kom red my. Kom haal my uit. And it happened to me because I was getting tired then. I called one of the lifeguards and he came and I just rested on his kayak. And then I started swimming again and he saw me swimming and he's like, oh, this guy's fine. And then left me. I said, that's not what I said. I said, swim with me. I'm struggling to swim now. But we're dependent on the kayak. We're dependent on the one going next to us or on the beach. And Paul says, you will never find peace in these external things. You will never find a bank balance giving you peace. You will never find a situation giving you peace. Nothing external will come into your life and give you peace. He says the peace comes from in because it transcends from within. Immanuel Kant said it. I think he said it so beautifully. He said, when you turn inwards and you start discovering yourself and you go so deep inwards, you will come to a point where you realize you don't know anything. You can only know God. So when all else fails, turn to God. Whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want, I can do this through Him who gives me strength. Nou, dis daai versie wat ons almal tattoo. Philippians 4 verse 13. We all tattoo that. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. But the verse before that says, even though there's no food, even though there's no hope, even though there's nothing, I am content because I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Is Jesus enough? Overthinking and undertrusting. Where's your hope? How are you presenting hope to people tomorrow or after this? How are you gonna show them? Hope is not a thing. Hope is not something you present. Hope is not something that we just talk about. Hope is existential. Hope is metaphysical. Hope is a person. Hope is Jesus. And that person is in you and in me. Because verse 4, verse 13 says, ek is tot alles in staat deur hom wat vir my krag gee. So I read this thing this week, it's very interesting. There's a difference between in Jesus before he died and after he got resurrected. Because before he died, he used to walk with people and you used to see him and they used to notice him. The Pharisees, the scribes, hulle het na hom gekyk en hulle het gesien, dis Jesus and dis wat hy doen. But then after his death and resurrection, he appeared many times, and I did a sermon on that. He appeared many times. But now, what was interesting is after his death and resurrection, his appearance was weird. It was different. It was different. There's a lot of text here. I can go through all of them, but in some of those texts, like, you can see all authority has been given to him now. But in some of those texts, he now suddenly appears where doors are closed, he appears on the inside. Where doors are locked because they are afraid, he suddenly appears on the inside. And there's so many texts saying he appears and they do not realize him, they do not recognize him. And Thomas even says, Here, steek net jou hand, I just want to feel if it's really you. They do not even see his appearance. So if hope is a person, and I need to trust this person, which I struggle to see, how does it work? How does it work? So I'm going to tell you a story of how I ended up in my previous congregation. So I got this beroep Rissenburg toe right after my studies 2012. Yes, I'm old now. Kan ek oom se gehoor stukkie leen? And then it was a bad experience because I was young, it was my first year, and so my colleague left, And the church council came to me and they said, well, we need to get another reverend, but we're going to get someone older and old, because then we are guaranteed of the church's finances. So you're going to lose your job after the year contract. I said, okay. And then they said, but please organize a prayer meeting for that guy. Yes, ek raak wild. Ek raak willer as die wildtuin. Ek sit op Facebook. Always nice when your boss asks you to pray for someone who's going to take your job. And it turns out into a massive fight. End of the story, my contract ends. Now that was 2013. That was 2013. That was the 18th of December 2013. The only reason I know that is because I got married a month later. Now, my contract ends 18 November 2013. I'm getting married 18 December 2013. My wife is completely rational. Sy skryf goed neer en sy onthou alles. Sy onthou, she remembers what I did wrong 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 9 years ago. She remembers everything. So we sit in this place, and she's saying, okay, you don't have a job now. You're getting married. Let's take a list. Let's write down. Ek sal nog nooit vergeet, sy maak die boek op, sy sê, hoekom moet jy 'n dominee wees en hoekom nie? Why do you have to be a reverend and why not? Okay, let's go. A reverend, okay. Why not? Well, you don't have a job. You don't have a salary. You don't have a boss. That happened on the 18th of December. The 19th of December, I remember I was sitting in my car in front of the gate and I was crying and I was praying and I say, rock bottom, I was saying, Lord, how does this work? I mean, you're a man, you're supposed to be there for your wife. I mean, I'm getting married. How does this work? How does it work? My phone rings and a guy phones me. And I know this guy from nowhere. And he says, I heard you, Reverend. I said, yeah. He says, what do you want to do? I said, well, my wife said I shouldn't be a reverend anymore, but but I want to be a reverend. He says, how much you want? I said, what do you mean, how much do I want? I said, I want to be a reverend. I don't know how much. What's reverend? The 1st of December, I started at my previous congregation. Now, I don't know if you know the Dutch Reform in Gemeenskapkerk, but nothing happens quick in the Gemeenskapkerk. Nothing. Not even a service happens quick. It was a miracle that I got, like, in 15 days, I got called into being in that congregation. And I can't explain it to you. It didn't come from out there. It came from me saying to Jesus, now I can't do anything. Now you are everything. Because what I can do now is nothing. And then the call came. The call didn't come. I didn't phone. The call came because I turned and I said, Jesus, you are everything. Now I promised myself I wouldn't tell the second one, so I'm going to tell it. So just forgive him. Last year, we thought it was a great idea that my wife get operated the same day as my child, Mangelsheitel. And both of them came out of theater, and we knew the hospital lady. So in hospital they organized a private room for us as a family. Mianne is lying here, my wife's lying here, and I was on my knees because my child was screaming. She was screaming from pain. And I couldn't do anything for my child. And my wife was lying here. And it was so rough that people came in and said, what's going on? And all I could tell them was, my child is being operated and my wife has cancer. And I told him, Lord, you can give me 10 million rand. It's not going to change anything in my life. A physio came in. She said, what's going on? What's going on? I literally was on my knees saying, I can't help her. I can't help her. And I'm the man. I'm supposed to help them. Ek kan hulle nie help nie, Here. Net jy kan hulle help. Physio comes in. She touches Jessica. And she prays that Hiskia, where she says, extend her life by 10 more years. There she's sitting. There she's sitting. The thing is Jesus everything? There's a lot of text I put in there. Is Jesus everything? And I want to ask that to you. Is Jesus everything? Or is he just something? Is he really everything in your life?